Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Nashville Tour Stop podcast, broadcasting live today from a special location. We are on site at the SongTown USA studio here, kindly presented by our guest here, Mr. Clay Mills. Thank you for letting us use your beautiful, spacious studio here today.
Yeah, it's very spacious. You guys can't see it, but we're in a tiny little room.
Well, thank you so much for opening up your studio here for us, because I've recorded in a lot of places over the years. This is actually one of the more spacious places I've gotten to do it.
All right.
The early days of the podcast was just the closet with the blanket over the door. So thank you for letting us use your space today. So there's so much I want to cover with you today. Going to be hard to cram it all into one episode, but I'll try to be succinct. Yeah. Before we dive too far into one subject, I would love to get background about SongTown, the space we're using here. You co-founded with your friend Marty Dodson, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What was the purpose of SongTown when you founded it?
We started it as a Facebook kind of post every day. Marty and I would write, because we kept hearing about people coming to Nashville and getting ripped off by producers, charging them a lot of money, and we'll publish your song, but you need a demo, and then the demo's like $5,000. And we kept hearing stories like that. So we literally every day, either Marty or I would write this Facebook post and go, this is how the business works. Mm-hmm. And it kind of blew up on Facebook, and people were like, can you guys teach a class? So we did an online class, and then people were like, can you start a website? And so really we're trying to write full time as songwriters. And then at night I'm like building a website, and we're recording videos on how to write songs. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't sleep for about 4 or 5 years. But it was a lot of fun. And today we do community coaching and connections for songwriters around the world. We have about 4,000 members all over the world.
That's incredible.
And it's just a lot of fun.
It sounds like it grew way further than its original purpose then.
Yeah.
That's incredible. That's kind of the way that Nashville Tour Stop grew, because it wasn't supposed to be this extensive writers round or showcase that I put on. It was just a thing that was supposed to serve my band back when I started it, because a bar asked us to book one opening act, and they're like, just call it the something show.
Yeah.
And a guy in my band was like, we should call it the Nashville Tour Stop. And I'm like, that's a pretty good idea. And now it's just this whole other thing that was completely evolved from its original iteration.
It's a great name, you know. And
the SEO is perfect for it now. I do still get people asking if I'm a tour bus service, but maybe someday.
Yeah.
So when did you move to Nashville?
97.
97?
Yeah.
Had you been writing before that, though?
Yeah, I was in New York. I started out, well, first of all, I grew up in Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana.
Okay.
My dad was a teacher and college teacher. We moved around. So grew up in the South. When I was 19, I moved to New York City. Okay. And I wanted to be in the music business, but it was kind of like, well, how do you get a job writing songs, or how do you? And someone came along and heard my demo, and they were like, well, I run a jingle company. Would you write TV commercials?
Sweet.
So I was literally one of the first people in New York to get a computer and start programming tracks.
Wow.
And writing jingles. And so I did that for, probably 12 years in New York City. Kind of got burned out with that because it wasn't what I started out doing.
Right.
But I've always believed there's what you want to do, and then there are doors that open. Mm-hmm. And I believe you need to go through those doors.
Absolutely.
They're opening for a reason. So I did that, and then that led to me eventually moving to Nashville and becoming a songwriter.
So was your background in songwriting when you were 19? You said you moved to New York. Mm-hmm. Had you been writing recreationally before that?
Yeah.
Were you in bands and stuff?
I grew up in bands, and I was the guy in the band writing the songs. And,
yeah.
They all sounded like somebody else. They didn't sound like me yet. But
you never had an aspiration to be an artist yourself?
I did early on. In fact, when I came to Nashville, it was because Mark Bright, who produced Carrie Underwood, Black Hawk, all these great artists, he convinced me to move here to be an artist.
Okay.
And after a few years, I just was like, I don't know, I liked the idea of staying home and being a songwriter and collecting checks and not having to go out on the road. And it's a long story. My health wasn't great. I had Lyme disease, but I didn't know it. So I really could not have gone out on the road full time. Like, my health wouldn't have let me. So years later, I found out, oh, you have Lyme disease. We treated it. I feel better now than I felt in my 20s, you know. So it all worked out. I mean, I love writing songs, and, you know, I get to be the artist on my demo tapes.
You get to go back and listen to your version of it, and then you get to hear the hit writer sing it later.
Yeah, and I get to come home at the end of the day, and it allowed me to have a family, and so
it's allowed you to maintain what seems like a relatively stable life, just being a person and not losing yourself in the I am the artist on stage.
Right.
Because what I'm sure you've seen and what I see a lot is people become the parody of the rock star artist. And you're like, are you doing this because you think you should, or because you are actually like that?
I know, yeah.
Like, I don't want to get controversial. Does Morgan Wallen throw chairs off of roofs because he's like that, or is it because people expect that behavior?
Or was it just a publicity stunt?
Right. It very well could have been
that. Know. We don't know.
Yeah, so I have kind of related to that myself.
He's a great guy. Like, he has a good reputation in the business. So that's all I go by.
I remember moving here to be an artist myself, and really did kind of fall into that same position where I liked being able to go home at the end of the day. And I did my stints on the road, and it was fun.
Yeah.
It was a way to spend my life when I was 22. Yeah. But as a adult now with health insurance, I do appreciate being able to go to bed at 10 o'clock and wake up in the morning and not have a hangover.
Oh, man. I cannot do... Oh, yeah, I had many years of hangovers.
Yeah, the hangovers
You don't have to
changed.
be an artist to have hangovers.
Yeah, hangovers when you're 22 are different than they are when you're in your 30s and your 40s.
They hit a lot harder when you get in your 40s, yeah.
So one of the things I ask sometimes, but for somebody who's now a bona fide hit songwriter, what was the first song you wrote as a kid that you're like, I think that this is an important song that might lead to a more sustainable career as a musician? Because clearly, like, I wrote my first song about a Nintendo, but then I remember the first song that I wrote that was like, I want people to hear this. Do you remember a song that you wrote when you were young that was that kind of a watershed moment where you realized I'm improving?
Oh, man, I've never thought about this. I do remember my first song when I was like 8. It was called Don't Throw My Love in the Trash Can.
I love that.
But I don't know if I remember. I just always wrote songs.
Mm-hmm.
I don't ever remember there being a point that I went, oh, wow, maybe this is a turning point. It just felt like something I always did.
So New York was the place you moved first. Was that always the plan, to go to New York?
I was going to be an artist when I moved to New York.
Gotcha.
And I was doing more pop music, R&B.
Really?
So I was leaning a lot more to... I did not grow up a big country music fan.
Okay.
All the bands I played in, even the cover bands, we would do country the first set of the night, and then it got harder and harder.
The later and later it gets.
So, I always liked more pop stuff and rock stuff. And so, I didn't set out to be a country writer. But I got to New York, and then, like I said, I fell into the jingles. It was actually great training because they would call me up and say, we need something like this dance song that's out right now. And so I would give them something in that ballpark. And then the next day they'd be like, well, we need something classical, or we need something heavy metal, and so it was always something different. And when I came to Nashville, started writing with artists, Lady Antebellum, Little Big Town, all these artists that I started writing with, I could do any kind of music they wanted to do.
That's good.
And so it was actually in a roundabout way, those dozen years in New York, doing something I wasn't crazy about. It was kind of like my music school.
That's definitely true, because I remember music school I was a composition and theory major, and being forced to write in a box of like, these are the rules.
Yeah.
and then they change and like, okay, these are the rules this time. And having to change different ways really does make you flex and be able to fit into a different situation like that.
Yeah.
So when you moved to Nashville, did you have connections that you were ready to hop into, or were you glad handing someone at a bar saying, I liked your song, you want to write?
No, I had connections. I would not move here. I was fortunate. I had a publishing deal
Cool.
before I moved here. So what happened is a friend of mine was a TV actor in New York, and he was trying to be an artist. And so he was bringing songs to Nashville, playing them for producers. Since he was an actor, the doors would open for him. So he started playing our songs.
Sweet.
And Mark Bright at EMI goes, these are really good. He's like, who did you write these with? And my buddy Ken Meeker said at Clay Mills, he's in New York. And so Mark Bright just picks up the phone and calls me. He goes, I want to come see you play a showcase. So he comes to New York. I had like 300 people packed into a club, and he liked what he heard. And he goes, I want to sign you to a pub deal.
That's a classic music industry story. That's cool.
So, I came to Nashville with the publishing deal.
Sweet.
Now, what you don't know is the next part of the story. I was at EMI for 2 years, and then I got dropped.
Mm-hmm.
So then I'm back at square one, and it's like, so then I went, Chris Dubois was working at ASCAP before he was a songwriter, and he sent me out to meet with 35 different publishers. And finally, one small little publisher signed me to my second deal.
Okay.
About a year after I lost my first
Now,
deal.
we have a lot of developing listeners, people who are fresh off in the industry, just trying to figure out how to get their feet underneath them. Mm-hmm. And that's something I wanted to talk to you about, is how to cull the expectations of what, quote, the success looks like. So you came to Nashville with a pub deal already, but when you have
But it
these...
didn't help me.
Yeah.
I didn't get any cuts.
Mm-hmm.
They got me one cut right in the beginning. They weren't pitching my songs because they thought I was an artist.
Mm-hmm.
And so, he's an artist. They didn't take
They're
me
your
serious.
songs.
And they didn't take me serious as a writer.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, it kind of hurt me having that deal. And like I said, when I lost the deal, I had to start completely from scratch.
From zero.
Yeah.
So when you get that first cut, the pub deals don't just roll in, do they? I think that's what a lot of people who move here, they have that I have arrived attitude. And I'm sure you've experienced that with these people who move here. And that's one of the things I try to teach these kids who are moving here. It's like, yes, you're here. So are 1,000 other people just like you. And what kind of things can these artists do differently that might elevate them to make them stand out from the noise, because there is so much noise in this town? Do you have any recommendations of, like, if somebody did just move here, they have no connections, what would you tell them to do?
I would join
Join a song.
Join SongTown.
Yeah.
I hate to do the shameless plug, but that's why we have SongTown, is that artists, songwriters can join. They can meet each other and collaborate. That's really what I was getting to, is you've got to find a community, whether it's us, whether it's another community, where you can meet other songwriters, right. You can meet artists, because you have to start co-writing.
Right.
This is a co-writing town.
It sure is.
Yeah.
I had never co-written when I moved here.
Me neither.
And my first co-write was with a woman named Jan Buckingham, who you might know.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting down in her, like, kitchen table, and I presented her with the song. She goes, I don't want to do that one. I want to start a new one. I was like, well, what do we do? And she just gave me, okay, well, what do you want to write about?
Yeah.
And then I started playing some chords, and then she just word vomited a song out. And I had never seen that happen before. And she taught me, it's like, you have to go get better at this. Like, nobody's going to want to work with you if you suck.
Yeah.
And you have to get better. So it's practice, 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 practice. And then I think Carnegie Hall is make a left, right?
Yeah, so you move to town, you meet other writers, go to writers' nights, and start co-writing as often as you can. Just as an example, a lot of people move to town, they're like, well, how can I write with that hit writer or that hit artist? Mm-hmm. How can I get in the room with Keith Urban or whoever? And I can understand moving to town and thinking, well, that's what I'm supposed to do. But literally, it's all about your peer group writing together, and you move up together. Mm-hmm. For instance, the artist Gail, last year.
She's one of ours.
last year had the biggest song in the world, A B C D E F U. She met Sarah Davis in Songtown when they were teenagers and they started writing together. Neither one of them had a deal at the time. They were just starting out. Gail was like 13. And so they came up together. That's my point, is you meet people around you. And so many times aspiring writers go, well, the people around me aren't very good, because they're looking at the accomplished writers or the accomplished artists. So
they're looking at the cream of the crop who have risen to the top. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that the people around you can't rise there as well.
Yeah, don't do what successful people are doing now. Do what they did in the beginning. And they all started out the same way.
Right. That's one of the things that I see as, I don't want to call it a shortcoming of a lot of songwriters now, is they're writing stuff that, like, this should be on the radio today. And I'm like, well, that stuff's already on the radio, right? What should be on the radio tomorrow, man?
Right. And that's the next step, is learning to be you. You know, you've got to write in the language of the market, but you also have to put yourself into it in your own voice.
Right.
You know, the other day I was asking a couple of publishers that signed me early on, why did they sign me? Because I knew I wasn't great in the beginning. And both of them said it was because I had a unique voice.
Okay.
And so you can't shy away from that.
Right.
You have to develop your own style. But, you know, I mean, just look, Hardy came along. He didn't sound like anyone before him. You know, he had his own
he's a star.
Style going, you know, and that's kind of what you have to do if you're trying to write like Ashley Gorley, great writer, but they've already got Ashley. You know, if you're trying to write like Hardy, great writer, but they've already got Hardy. And they're going to cut his songs before they cut yours.
Sure are.
So the only chance you have is to be you and be different than that.
To rise with your own people.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that. And that was one of the purposes of Tour Stop as well early on, was giving people a community to be involved in, because there's so many of them. And like, if Tour Stop or Songtown's not the one for you, there are lots. That they should be ours. But
you're better at the shameless plug than I am. I like stutter. Oh, you.
No, there's so many of these though, and I at least in the position I'm in, booking so many shows, I've kind of identified the different pockets of people, and I can put them together so that they can play their shows together. But then they get excited about playing, and then they'll hear somebody that they might not know on a different show, and then they think that person's good, and then you can get plugged in with them, or they can get plugged in with you, and it doesn't have to be an A to B, a B to C. You can skip around as long as you enjoy what you're doing.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've lost track of over the years, is what do I enjoy doing, and what am I doing just to progress in the industry? And you can't lose the joy. That's why we moved here. If we wanted to make art shouldn't just feel like work all the time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if it does feel like work, you won't be able to sustain it. Even if you have some success, if it's not fun, then God help you, because you're not going to last.
Yeah, my dad didn't work at his job for 42 years because he just liked going to the same job for 42 years. He liked it. Yeah. Yeah, you have to like what you do.
Yeah, and I see so many people in the music business that are stressed out all the time, and that's not, you don't want that person in the room hanging with you, because it is a stressful business. So in order to counterbalance the stress of the business, you have to be able to go into a room, hang out with other people, and have fun and be creative. You can't get your best work under, with a gun to your head.
No, sure can't. Yeah. So that's something that I've talked about with several people on the podcast before, is that dynamic of being a good hang. And I've told people before that they would probably, I don't want to say you might get further in the industry if you're just fun to be around, because I don't know if it might have been Jerry Garcia as an example of somebody in Garth Brooks' band who, I mean, he's a stellar guitar player, but he might have
I thought you were talking about Jerry Garcia from the Grateful Dead.
Oh, maybe I'm thinking of somebody else.
No, I know who you're talking about.
You know who I'm talking about, because you might get a gig like that just because you're friends with somebody. And are you familiar with Priscilla Block? Her guitar player, Sarah Jones, was just her roommate at the time, and they wrote these songs together. So when Priscilla got signed, she didn't want to hire some fancy hot rod guitar player. She could have. Yeah. She wanted to work with her friends.
They came up together.
One of
the peer group get something good going on, and they bring everyone else up together.
Yeah, and is the old saying, the rising tides raises all ships. Yeah. It is a cliche, but it is a cliche for a reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not, I mean, obviously she has to be a good enough guitar player to keep the gig.
Of course.
Like, I don't care how good a hang you are. If you suck at writing or you suck at playing, you're not going to last.
There's got to be some talent there to hold it.
Got to be talented. But you also, I think the only people that ever get away with being jerks are just those people that are born once every 1,000 years that are so talented that they get away with it.
Yep.
But 99% of mortals
it's not me.
Can't get away with that.
Yeah, that's not me.
Yeah, so you got to work at your craft, and you got to be, fun to be around.
Yeah, and I tell people that all the time, because people will come to shows or they'll go to the writers' nights and they'll immediately do that. Hey, how do I get involved? I'm like, you're doing it right now, man. Just be here. And they're like, well, when can I play? And I'm like, I gotta make sure you can play first.
Yeah.
And there's a certain threshold to be able to get to that thing. So if you can play a writers' night, you're good enough to play at a lot of places in this town. But there are the elevated shows. Like, you're not going to get on at the Bluebird if you just moved here without any credential, and Barbara doesn't know who you are. Like, you have to go there and be part of the world that you want to be part of. That's something that I encourage people who move here.
I skipped all that stuff.
You just dove right in.
No, I mean, I just knew early on. I played a couple of shows, and the crowd was talking the whole time. It's probably like at that place, the Broken Spoke. I don't even know if they still have it.
Sure did.
But the crowd was talking. They weren't really listening to the songs. And the guy at the end of the round, a couple of chairs down from me, he starts playing a hit, and everybody instantly is quiet. They're listening. And so I made this weird decision. I said, I'm not going to play a writer's round until I have a hit I can play.
Interesting.
And so that kind of motivated me. And I literally didn't do a writer's round for a few years but that I don't recommend that. I mean, especially these days, I think it's great to go out and meet people.
There are a lot of opportunities to do that now.
Yeah.
So that's
you
a great.
Wouldn't have liked me then. I'm not doing your show.
You're not doing the tour stop. Well, that's a great place for a cliffhanger. I'd want to hear more about that song, but we'll come right back after this commercial message with the Nashville Tour Stop podcast. And we're back with the Nashville Tour Stop podcast, broadcasting live from the SongTown USA studio today, episode number 121, featuring Clay Mills. Clay, thank you again for joining us.
Great to be here.
Now, right before the commercial break, you gave us a little teaser about you didn't want to play a writer's round until you had that first hit song.
Yes.
Would you please tell us about what that first song was?
First hit song was Beautiful Mess by Diamond Rio. It's like your hole in one as a golfer. Like, you know how you go out there when you first start playing golf and you look out and you get this hole in one, and then you're trying to figure out, how do I do that again? So how
do I get the ace in the hole?
Yeah. So your first hit song, you're like, gosh, how do I do that again?
So who did you write that with?
Wrote it with Sonny Lemaire and Shane Miner. Two great guys. We were just in a room. I put on a drum loop, and we just kind of goofing around. I was talking about having fun. And I just started going like, I love the Red Hot Chili Peppers. So I was like, going out of my mind these days, just to like a drum loop. And we just all started laughing, and we were like, well, what if we put some chords to that?
Yeah, bring it on.
So I was like, let me see, what key was that in? So, going out of my mind these days, like I'm walking around in a haze. I can't think straight, I can't concentrate, I need a shade. I go to work and I look tired. Anyway, so we just kind of put chords to it and kept that rhythm going and built the song from there.
That's cool.
It was entirely by accident, just because we were goofing around.
Do you remember who wrote the actual hook, The Beautiful Mess?
Yes, because well, I should back up. We had the title first.
Okay, so that
So
was the root of it.
often in Nashville, people like go, "I got this great title I want to write," before you have anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And so my co-writer Sonny Lemaire brought in the title "Beautiful Mess," and I was like, "That's cool," because I'd actually heard that phrase in like 3 different movies and TV shows, like, and it had been in my mind as I had wanted to write that title,
Right.
and he brought it in, and it,
You're like, dang it, you said it this time.
but no, that just those things happen. You go, okay, we're meant to write that today. And
That's
so
cool.
we started with the title, and then we put on a drum loop, and we're just goofing around. And
So was this a song that you had written when you had a pub deal again?
I did have a pub deal at that time.
So when you wrote the song, did you know that Diamond Rio was looking for another big like title track? It just happened to get pitched and taken?
Dan Huff, great producer, legendary producer, put it on hold for a year and a half for Faith Hill.
Wow.
Now, there's a whole story. Shane Meyer, one of the co-writers, was an artist at the time. But he had lost his deal and he was looking for another deal. His producer was Dan Huff too. So we didn't, how do you say it? It was on hold for Faith Hill, but I think Shane was also hoping that he could get the song eventually. Right. And so finally my publisher, was willing to piss everyone off. And can I say that on your...
Yeah, sure can. I've said far worse things on my podcast before.
My publisher was willing to take the bullets, and he gave the song to Diamond Rio.
Okay.
And so there were some other people, but I mean, realistically, the song was on hold for a year and a half.
That's limbo.
You can't really, at that point, I've got to eat.
Yeah.
Like I have a family to feed. I had no hits.
Right.
No real cuts. And my publisher's going, I need you to get this Diamond Rio cut. And they cut it and took 52 weeks to get to number 1.
Wow.
Like it's one of those songs that it went to number 1 after 52 weeks, fell down to number 3, then went back to number 1 for another few weeks. So it was literally on the chart a long time.
That's a really long time.
Top 20 pop song out of it.
I remember hearing it on the radio when I was a kid.
Yeah.
My folks listen to music like that all the time, so I definitely heard that on the radio back then.
Yeah, Future Clay wrote that. I'm not that old.
So was that the song that changed your life, so to speak?
You think it would.
Mm-hmm.
It gave me confidence.
Okay.
But it wasn't like people were clamoring to cut my songs after that.
Okay.
My next number 1 was probably 10 years later.
Okay.
I mean, I had a few hits. Trying to think. Andy Griggs, I had a song called She Thinks She Needs Me. That was top 5. Clay Walker, I had a top 5 song with him. So, I mean, I had some stuff going on. Yeah. But my next number 1 was with Darius Rucker with Don't Think I Don't Think About It. So it took me a while to get another.
I actually heard, it made me think of you because I went to a writer's round maybe a month ago and I heard a girl say that this next song is called Don't Think I Don't Think About It. And I was like, I don't think you wrote that song. And then she played this different song with the same line. I was like, oh, you don't know, do you? You don't know. Yeah, you don't know that was a hit song already.
Well, yeah, I mean, if it was a hit song in like 2011 or something. So it's been a while. But
been a minute.
Yeah.
But still. It's hard. Is that the one right there?
Yeah, it was on that record, yeah.
Certified gold.
Yeah.
That's pretty great.
That's the gold version. It did go platinum. But as a songwriter, they don't buy these plaques for you.
You have to buy them yourself, don't you?
So, at $350 a pop, I don't think I've gotten this. I usually just get one.
Yeah.
If it goes multi-platinum, then I don't buy the next one and the next one. And
you don't need every subsequent gold medal.
Yeah, I don't.
Until it goes diamond, maybe you get a fresh diamond one.
I've never had a diamond.
I haven't had any of them. I had one cut when I was still trying to be a songwriter, and I still get royalties coming in every now and then. The girl will play it live, or we'll get streaming stuff. But thank you, BMI, for giving me my whatever it is, $80 a year on that one cut.
Yeah.
So when you have these pub deals. There's kids who get themselves into bad deals all the time, and this is one of the things that you help with now.
Yeah.
Is what are some of the things people can look out for in what might otherwise look like a predatory publishing deal?
Well, the first thing I tell people, because I do get emails all the time from Songtown members going, I got offered this deal. Should I sign it? And a lot of times they're bad. And a lot of times I say, don't. Get an attorney to fight for some stuff for you. And nobody listens. They just sign. And so the first thing I want to tell you is don't feel so desperate that you have to sign something that comes along, because I know that feeling. You feel like, well, I'm never going to get anything else, or this is the only deal, and it's not like that. So, I just get your confidence up. That's the first thing.
Right.
Learn how to say no.
The power of no is something that a lot of people need to learn.
Yeah, because you'll get better deals by saying no. And if you have an issue with something in a contract and they're not willing to negotiate, then you don't want to be with them anyway. So it's a hard thing. I had to learn the hard way myself with some early deals that I signed away too much. And
that stinks.
Yeah, but you learn.
Yeah, and look at you now.
Yeah, I made up for it.
Yeah, so with things like that, are there other resources besides like your Songtown that you would talk about, like for people who are trying to get the deal, or is it just write good songs? Is that the industry you think now is just write good songs and the pub deal might come? Or I don't know too much about like song plugging, because there's people who are like, oh, I'm a song plugger,
Right.
or is it all just kind of a luck of a draw?
Well, I will say stay away from sites where, in general, where you mail a song, pay them $30, and they say they're going to pitch it to someone, because that's not really part of how the music business works. They'll have a list of 100 people looking for songs. Like I've seen stuff. Songtown member will shoot me an email and say, "Hey, this list says they're looking for a Darius Rucker song." I'm like, okay. Let's be honest. Darius Rucker has written everything he's ever recorded or co-written with people like me. So he's not on your song. Mm-hmm. He's not going to cut it.
Right.
And secondly, he just finished his album.
Right.
Why are they telling you he's looking for songs now?
Right.
So
it's outdated information at that point.
Yeah. So those kind of sites, I think you should stay away from. Try to write, learn your craft, get better. Co-write with people in Nashville, if Nashville's where you want to be.
Right.
And doors will open. Word gets around. It's like any other business. If you need a roof on your house, you ask your friends and they go, so-and-so is the best roofer.
Do you know a good roofer?
Yeah. So if you're
I know a good roofer.
I know, yeah. So it's the same way with songwriting. Word gets around. He's a great lyricist. He's a great track guy. He's a great melody guy. Wow, what a phenomenal artist this guy is. He's got a great voice. Our girl, female producer. So I think word gets around, but word only gets around if you're fun to be around and you're really good.
Right. Word doesn't, and it also gets around if you're an asshole. That gets around real quick too.
Yeah.
Well, Darius Rucker is actually one of the songwriters and artists I wanted to talk with you about. How did you get plugged in with Darius Rucker? That's a household name for most of us now.
Yeah, so he was doing his last Hootie and the Blowfish tour. And my publisher's like, hey, you want to go on the road, write with Hootie and the Blowfish? And I was, sure, I'll go. And I never was a big fan of theirs because I was, at that time when they were famous, Hootie, I was, not even into rock music. I was listening to R&B music. And so I got a greatest hits album the night before I climbed on their tour bus. I was like, okay, well, they use a lot of guitar riffs. That's cool. And I got a feel for what they do. And I went on the bus. Well, I guess it was my jingle training.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I get what they do, And so
you can plug and play.
Yeah. I got on their tour bus in Kentucky. Darius was like, well, what do you want to write for my country record? Well, my publisher didn't even tell me he was doing a country record.
Thanks.
I was writing with a rock band. So we just got to talking, and I said, dude, this is not what you say to a superstar when you first meet him. I said, I don't feel like writing today. And so,
That's the power of no.
yeah. So, well, I guess so.
Yeah.
So maybe he was intrigued by that. And he was like, well, what's going on? I was like, I just broke up with my girlfriend. I've been dating for a year and I'm second guessing myself. He goes, man, we all do that. We all do. And I was like, really? He goes, yeah. He goes, I still think about somebody from, back in high school from time to time. You wonder how they're doing. And I was like, wow. It's like, really? And he's like, yeah, don't think I don't. I was like, oh, okay. So I had my phone and I typed that into my phone. We wrote something else that day, but the next morning I woke up and just this chorus to Don't Think I Don't Think About It kind of came out. I played it for him and he loved it. We wrote the verses and it was his first #1 song ever as an artist.
Wow.
Even Hootie had never had a #1 song. So
that must make you as a songwriter feel like I have arrived. My songwriting has finally...
Well, it's funny because when I had my prior hits before that, there was always several writers in the room. So as a songwriter, when it's just you and the artist, the town seems to think you're a better writer.
It's a testament.
Yeah, it's like, oh, well, because they can't give credit to the co-writers.
Right.
Because he was the only, quote, writer in the room. Darius is a phenomenal writer, too. But it just gives you a little bit more street
That's incredible.
cred. Yeah.
So what year did that come out?
2010 or 11.
10 or 11? Yeah. Okay. Man, that's incredible because I've seen you play these songs at your shows before, and I think I can't recall that if we had met just over an email, because I know that I had seen you play several times because you used to, and you might still know Megan Barker. Mm-hmm. And I think I saw you and Marty play together at one of her old pajama shows ages and ages ago. But that's also where I saw Exile play. So it might have been the same night that I met you just in passing. And I was like, oh, I know your songs. And you're like, thanks. 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 Because I was just a starry-eyed kid back then. And I was like, I want to write with the hit songwriter.
I was that songwriter jerk. Thanks.
Well, we've talked so much about songwriting, and I could pick your brain for hours, but there's so much more that you do. And you're an author of a book that I have on my bookshelf at home. I would love to talk to you about the differences between songwriting and book writing.
Oh, man.
So
don't ever try to write a book. It took me like 4 years. So, I mean, in a way, okay, so how the book came about, when we started SongTown, I started just doing these lesson videos for people to kind of teach the craft. Mm-hmm. And so I had literally hundreds of these lesson videos, and a SongTown member, my co-writer of the book, Bill O'Hanlon,
friend of mine,
he went through all of those, and he goes, well, I put together a book outline from your lesson videos.
Cool.
So it was kind of outlined, but actually taking that and making it, into 10,000 plus words was a bigger, harder deal than I thought.
Right.
But after about 4 years and going back and forth, the editor would look at it, they would suggest changes, then I'd go work on it again. And so,
How is that different from your process with songwriting? Because songwriting can be so short, and sometimes there's, not even 100 words in a song. So, like, how did you have to alter your creative writing brain to be able to put in that many words without it getting redundant?
It's really was never redundant because there's just so much information. It goes through. I had so many different lesson videos to cover, so many different things that I do as a writer. Mm-hmm. So I didn't have to think about it from scratch. I had already done that for 6 years of doing videos. So it's literally every little thing I use in my day-to-day writing, I just put it in a book. So the actual words were no different than writing lyrics for me. Mm-hmm. It's just telling a story.
Okay.
The hard part was, I feel what Bill did was put together an outline, because how do you take hundreds of videos and go, I think they should go in this order.
Right.
And then,
Right.
it was like that to me, that I don't have that kind of mind.
Right. It's like trying to make a lasagna. You're like, oh well, I need all of these things, and here's all the ingredients. But
Yeah.
who is to say which? I mean, a lasagna is layers, but bad example.
And
but,
if you're just starting out, like I really made this for all levels of writing, and so it's hard for me to remember what did I need when I was an absolute beginner. But Bill was a new songwriter, so he was able to say, no, these things here, these lessons would be great to put in the beginning of the book. And so it was really helpful.
And he was a seasoned author at that point already, right? Because I know he had was it an Oprah book club or something?
Yeah.
Do One Thing Different, Bill O'Hanlon. I have that one also. But how did you meet Bill? Was it just through Songtown?
Yeah.
Again, proof to the concept. Just get involved somewhere.
Yeah.
It's not a revolutionary thing, but a lot of people don't get it. Like, you just need to be plugged in somewhere, and have some fun.
Yeah,
you might
it's literally like everything I know about writing melody
is right in there.
Is in here, and the beauty of it is there's not a bunch of theory, because in day-to-day life as songwriters we don't use a lot of theory.
But that's why I ditched it.
We're not going, I'm playing a C7 flat 13 chord here, and then I'm going to the minor dominant of the alternate related key in the Phrygian mode. Like, there's none of that. Like,
it's like, this sounds good.
Right. And so I use a lot of terms that we just use as songwriters, you know? And a lot of techniques that we use as songwriters where it's easy to understand. And I'll be honest, I went a year of Berklee Music College.
Okay.
When I came to Nashville, I had to unlearn everything.
Right.
Because all that book knowledge does nothing for, a songwriter.
And that's something that, living in Nashville, we're surrounded by Belmont songwriting majors. And Belmont is a wonderful institution, don't get me wrong, but when you start listening to some of these kids who've just graduated, a lot of their music does sound the same.
Yeah.
And it's because, of course, they all just learned the exact same things. But book learning will only take you so far. And you've also got to go live a life worth writing about.
Yeah.
That's something that, being in college, I mean, I wrote music when I was in college, and it was all garbage. Because the only thing I did was go to work at a candy store and then go to class. Like, that wasn't interesting. And then as you grow up, you start being able to have experiences, and you get to learn that maybe what I learned in the book or in college might not be exactly what.
This is the anti-college
This
book.
is the anti-college book. Plug.
And the other cool thing, because my career, I did so many different styles of music, it showed me I learned techniques that work in every genre.
Okay.
So I only put stuff in this book that works in every genre.
So it's not just a country applicable.
Oh, no.
That's great.
Not at all. So I have examples of music going back to classical music through literally every genre of music, from classical to Taylor Swift. They're all using the same techniques. It's just different, done with a different attitude of the singer.
Okay.
But when you're looking at rhythm and how to make hooky rhythm patterns, and when you're trying to marry lyrics to melody in a certain way that's going to grab the listener's attention, all that stuff is the same everywhere.
And that's something that you can't just go get taught from a blackboard. You got to learn it from the anti-college book.
Yeah, the anti-college book.
Well, thank you so much for being on. I've got a couple more things I want to talk about. For people who are just in town, we've talked about it a little bit, things to go do. The Bluebird, there's so many wonderful writers around. Are there any things in Nashville that aren't specifically related to the industry that you recommend people who might be moving here, or maybe to New York, things they can do to enhance their writing or their creative process? And I know that's a loaded question, too.
Yeah. If you like acting, I always thought that improv acting was the closest thing to songwriting, because if you look at improv actors on TV or in a theater, one person says something and then the other person has to come up with something that plays off of that. And it's yes and. So it's exactly like co-writing songs. So if you're into acting, that's a cool thing to do. It's probably not what you were expecting me to say.
No, and there's no real wrong answers for that.
Yeah.
Because I came here to be a songwriter, and actually the first job I got in Nashville that was paid was as an actor.
Oh, okay.
I was on the TV show Nashville.
You had that voice.
Yeah.
You were on the TV show?
I was on the TV show for 5 episodes, but because
what did you do?
I was, so I showed up to be an extra. They're like, you can have $80 to be a blur in the background. But one of the actors got fired on set. And I was the closest person to the actor that got fired. And the director goes, "You're fired. Get off set. You have his part now." And I'm like, cool. So I got on TV just by a proximity thing.
What season was it?
Season 6. So I was in 6 episodes. I was in the finale at the Ryman. It was crazy. So I
had songs on that show, but I don't think anything in season 6. It would have been cool if we had
met up like that. Yeah. Yeah. So it was a crazy just twist of fate that the first paid job I got here was actually as an actor. And I had friends out in Los Angeles trying to be actors, and they were so jealous, and I didn't care. I had no aspirations to be an actor. I still don't. But they were like, "Man, you should sign up for SAG-AFTRA." I was like, "Nah, I don't want to do that." They're like, "But you can get paid so much more." And I was like, "Yes, but I would have to do it again." And I had no interest in that. So
you have to learn what you're doing.
Yeah, and I had acted in high school plays, but that's high school plays.
Yeah.
I don't want to be the guy who's like, "Oh, I did theater once, so I'm going to go be an actor." No, I don't want to do that. Yeah. So I got thrown into that world, but I had no aspirations of acting. So you came here, pub deal in hand, aspirations of artistry, and found yourself in songwriting. As a songwriter now, what is the most gratifying part of your work? Is it playing the intimate shows at the Bluebird, or is it waiting for the next platinum record?
Honestly, these days I just like helping young writers.
Cool.
You know? I get a lot of joy out of seeing people like Sarah and Gail go on and succeed, and
it's being the thing they dreamt of.
I've got the wall of gold records. I'm not trying to brag or anything, but I did that. I did the whole. Everyone's into sync writing now. I did that in New York with the jingle writing and doing the sync world. And so my third act has been putting most of my focus on teaching the craft. I'm going to keep great songwriting going, so we don't lose these techniques, because there's a lot of craft to
There's a lot of craft. There's a lot left to learn.
Yeah.
Well, do you have any other nuggets you'd like to leave our listeners with this week?
I don't know. You seen any good TV shows lately? I get a lot of lines from TV shows.
Okay.
A lot of
I actually do too.
Yeah.
I do too.
And they're much better writing today than there was when I started as a songwriter. TV shows were bad, but there's great shows now.
We are in a golden age of television right now. I sure think that. There's a show that my dad recommended called Only Murders in the Building with Steve Martin and Martin Short.
Oh, wow.
It's excellent. So
I'll check it out.
Check that one out. Well, Clay, can you give us your plugs for Songtown, your book, where we can find you and learn more about you?
Songtown.com, community coaching and connections for songwriters. You can email me, clay@songtown.com. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Wonderful resource to learn more about Songtown and amazing songs. Clay, thank you.
Oh, what we should say? In October, Songtown's going to do a takeover of Nashville.
Should say that, yes. Yep, we're going to be doing your 10-year anniversary.
Yes.
Congratulations on 10 years. That's incredible. Yeah. Well, we'll make an official announcement about that. Well, I'm sure you have plenty of your members and your writers and people who are involved that are going to be there that night, but we're very excited for that as well. That'll be at Baseline Brewery.
Yeah.
Looking forward to that. Clay, thank you for joining us on the Tour Stop podcast today. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back next week with episode 122. You can follow us at NashvilleTourStop.com, anywhere on your social media platforms at Nashville Tour Stop. But until the next time, we'll just give Clay a thank you one more time, buddy. And until then, do remember, all roads lead right back here to the Nashville Tour Stop.